it's only going to get better. It's going to get tighter. It's going to be sillier. It's going to get funner. It's going to get more thoughtful, more provocative, more authentic, more real, more honest. All the things that YouTube, that content in general these days is lacking. We're bringing it here to the Cha-Cha Beat. Cha-cha-cha. Hey, tchotchkes. Welcome back to another episode of the Cha-Cha Beat. There's so much pressure to say like the perfect thing in the beginning of your video, because if I don't say like the perfect thing in the first like 5 seconds of my video, you'll stop watching. Maybe I'm not like every other YouTuber. You can watch videos on YouTube that are like, oh, we'll give you the script for the perfect YouTube video, and this is the formula for the perfect YouTube video. And thus, even if people are talking about different things, videos seem to kind of have the same like just vibe to them. And when everyone's kind of replicating the same formula, I don't know, it loses like that creative spark to me. And so at the Cha-Cha Beat, we're not trying to replicate anyone else. I'm not trying to copy anyone else's formula. Yes, I am trying to be engaging. I'm not looking to bore you or waste your time. But the whole point of the Cha-Cha Beat is to think differently, think for yourself. It's fun to think for yourself. It's kind of hard. It's a little scary when you're not doing what everyone else on YouTube is doing and what everyone on YouTube says you should be doing. But if you stick with me, I promise you it is going to be worth it. Like I'm still new here, tchotchkes. I'm still figuring out this whole recording myself aspect. And although I have lived most of my adult life talking to myself out loud constantly, because I am an older millennial, I'm 40, the notion of talking to the camera just does not come naturally to me. Don't they call that like the millennial pause, when you turn on the camera and to talk, and a millennial kind of takes a second to shift into it, whereas like Gen Z or whatever came after the millennials, you turn on the camera and they just go. So I'm just getting started. I'm just getting comfortable. I'm just getting used to it. I know it can be a little meandering, but it's only going to get better. It's going to get tighter. It's going to be sillier. It's going to get funner. It's going to get more thoughtful, more provocative, more authentic, more real, more honest. All the things that YouTube, that content in general these days is lacking. We're bringing it here to the Cha-Cha Beat. So all that said, let's get into today's video. We're going to talk about whether or not women were happier in the 1950s. You know, before we do, I have to tell you to like this video and subscribe to my channel. That's what all the YouTube gurus tell me to do. But also, you like this video. You want to see more? You want to see the evolution of the Cha-Cha Beat? You're going to want to subscribe to this channel. And you might as well hit that notification bell while we're at it so that you never miss a beat. All right, enough of my rambling. Let's get into today's video.
Recently, I watched this debate about whether feminism has gone too far. And one very funny argument was made by this woman about why women in the 1950s were actually more miserable than they are now. She uses the TV series Mad Men as an example. She literally picked one of the worst possible examples of a 1950s husband to make her point about women's happiness in 1950s marriages. I'm going to play that clip now, and I'm going to tell you why she's wrong afterwards.
It's not.
Before we even get into the clip, I have to come correct and say that, like, theoretically, Don Draper and, what was her name? Betty Draper, they were married in the 1950s, but the show Mad Men starts in 1960 or 1961. So this is not even a married couple from the 60s that this expert at the panel is about to educate us on. So keep that in mind.
It's not that women were so happy and fulfilled in the 1950s because their husbands would go to work. You know, Don Draper would go off into the city. He would have a fulfilling career. Then he would sleep with any number of women and come home to his wife who knew he was having affairs, who could sense it, who could vibe it, who could smell the perfume. and had to just put up with it until she couldn't any longer.
Now, while it is of course not a great thing that your husband is cheating on you all the time, she is literally using a top 1% guy in terms of attractiveness as an example from a fictional story. She also forgot to mention that the guy had a very traumatic childhood and that his coping mechanism is basically being an alcoholic and being a sex addict. The guy is actually very unhappy and is stuck in his own self-destructive patterns, which makes him ruin every relationship he has, including the one with his children. This is obviously not the average guy she's talking about, and his wife is not the average woman. She was a literal model before she married him and became a housewife. So I don't really think you can compare your average 1950s couple to this couple. And by the way, the series actually plays in the 60s and not in the 1950s, so that's another detail that she missed. I mean, your average couple in the 1950s probably look more like this. But this woman talks about it as if it's the most normal situation ever for a 1950s couple in America.
Another thing that needs to be called out that you can't, on why you can't just swap in a couple from the 60s and say, oh, this is representative of women in the 50s, is because the 60s are not the same as the 50s. In 1960, the FDA approved the first birth control pill. So right there, everything that happened after 1960 as far as women is concerned is different than everything that ever happened to women prior to that, including the 1950s. So I don't know who let this woman on the panel. I mean, I would think that before this conversation started, she knew what they were. I mean, she's starting the conversation, so she knows what she wants to talk about. And in the same breath, she's saying the 1950s and Mad Men. And it's just like, what? Who let this woman in? Right there, I'm not going to be able to take anything you say seriously because your prime example is not correct. That's crazy. That's wild. Who let that woman on the panel there?
Oh, contrary to popular belief, I wasn't around in the 1950s, so I can't really tell you much about my experience being a woman in that time period. So I did what every Gen Z person would do. I asked ChatGPT, the 03 version, to compare the average 26-year-old woman in the 1950s to the average 26-year-old woman now. I've got my laptop here. Let's see what it comes up with. So it gives me a bunch of data. According to my friend 03,
I would say that the average woman in the 1950s would not be wearing a top with a heart cut out on her chest. I like what she did using the images to kind of get our mind in the state of comparing these two women, but that shirt's a little anachronistic for being on an average 26-year-old woman in the 1950s. Maybe like a nice blouse with a little ruffle collar would have been more appropriate.
70 to 75% of 26-year-old women in America were already married, compared to less than 30% now. I'm gonna lie, that is a very significant drop. Although that doesn't mean, of course, that all of these women are single. They might just not be married. Children, roughly 1 to 2 kids by 26 on average in the 1950s. Now the typical 26-year-old has no children. That is no surprise to me at all. Living situation. Most live with a spouse in their own home. Now 12% of women from 25 to 34 live with their parents in 2022. Luckily, I wasn't one of those. A further 40% rents, and less than 39% under 35 owns a home. So far, it all sounds very depressing compared to the 1950s. Not gonna lie. Work and income. Only 34% of women between the ages of 25 and 34 were in the labor force in 1950. Interesting. Most full-time homemakers depended on a single male wage. Sounds like the dream. 78% of women between the age of 25 and 34 are in the labor force in 2023. And women hold 58% of college degrees. Wow. So we are actually more successful in college. And this is so funny, bottom line, no sugarcoating. I didn't even ask it to not sugarcoat things. But '03, I like your style, because sugarcoating only distracts from the truth. But the bottom line, according to my friend ChatGPT, is that 26-year-old women in the 1950s were mostly married mothers in owner-occupied suburbs, financially dependent but socially embedded in church and community. Sounds horrible to live in the 1950s. Who wants to be embedded in community? That sounds terrible. And being a mother? Sounds like a dream. But according to my friend, 26-year-old women now are mostly single, child-free renters, or boomerang kids. Better educated, earning their own income, less religious, but reporting far worse mental health despite far greater autonomy. Well, ouch. But the question remains, were women actually happier in the 1950s?
Before we get into that, just looking at the stats, the two things that really stand out to me are, first of all, we've got the birth control pill and the sexual revolution that happened, allowing women for the first time in all of human existence, which is like a really long time. For the first time ever, women are able to have sex without the fear or concern of becoming pregnant. And that is huge. Like, that is a complete game changer in how women started to act in society, because they could now be promiscuous without necessarily the consequences that were attached to promiscuity for the millennia before them. The other note that sticks out to me as a major differentiator for the 26-year-old woman of today versus the 26-year-old woman of the 1950s is the aspect of better educated. More women are going to college. More women than men are going to college. This in itself is not necessarily a problem. No problem with women going to college. Well, there are some problems actually with going to college, because going to college is a little bit of a racket. I've got another video where I talk about the 4 reasons why I am against free college. So if you are curious about that, I will link that in the top of this video and you can check it out. But my point is that women who go to college, that then get out of school and they get presumably a great job, and they are earning a certain level of money. The notion of hypergamy is where the rubber really meets the road, and the problem of all these women increasingly going to college starts to get a little funky, because women want to, whether they admit it or not, whether they are aware of it or not, we are programmed to be hypergamous creatures, which means that we are seeking a man that is like of higher status to us. And in a world where money, power, and education are status, a college educated woman, let's say she's 26 years old, she's living in New York City, let's say she's making 80 to 100K a year at her, fancy marketing job. She's going to want a man that is making, 100 to 150 or 150 to 250 or 350. I mean, some of these women are crazy with what they are after. However, when more women are going to college and less men are going to college, there's going to be less men naturally that have these high power jobs, and thus less men for these women to then marry. Of course, the notion of hypergamy is misleading, because as I mentioned, we are counting as status to be, money and education and fancy, bougie men in suits, which may in part be because of Sex in the City. So I want to take this moment to do my little, PSA. As a college-educated woman with a master's degree, I am hopelessly in love with my man, who is a plumbing contractor. He did not go to college. He didn't even take the SATs. Women have these like crazy standards of like the fancy man that they're looking for, and don't even recognize that Prince Charming may be a blue collar guy that is just the man of your dreams, that just will love and cherish and protect and provide for you. Maybe they understood that better in the 1950s, because definitely in the 1950s, there were a lot less men earning six figures.
This whole asking ChatGPT to compare 26-year-old women from different times was more of a joke and for entertainment. This is not some academic breakdown of feminism's influence on women's happiness. And there is no doubt that there were also women who were miserable in the 1950s. And there are definitely things that have improved a lot for women over the years.
I agree. It's not like every woman in the 50s was happy and every woman now is miserable. Like, there's going to be exceptions, obviously. We're talking about like the general vibe of the generation of women. Also, I want to note that one of the things that is better about being a woman now is healthier and happier for women now than in the 1950s is now we have terms like domestic violence. In the 1950s, the word like domestic violence was like not even, it wasn't a thing. No one had ever even heard that term before. Domestic violence was, it just was. It was part of the culture. Or I'm not saying at what degrees it happened. Maybe it happened more, maybe it happened less than it does now. But my point is that in the 1950s, women had no recourse. They had nowhere to go. They had no way to even describe what it was that was happening to them in a way that was criminal. In the early 1970s, the law was updated to reflect that husbands could their wives. Before that, it was just, he wanted it, she didn't, and he could forcibly take that from her. So definitely in the 1950s, but prior to the 1970s, husbands could take advantage of their wives at any time, and she couldn't do anything about it because they were married. Also, in the 1970s, the first domestic violence shelters came about, and women actually had like a place of refuge. And while, these problems are not solved now, there is domestic violence, there's too much domestic violence. It is undoubtedly better that we now have a vocabulary around it, and we see as a society that when a husband forces himself upon a woman, even if she is his wife, that is criminal. That's definitely better. So that's a win for women.
And cook for their husbands and just do laundry and stuff. But that's not what I'm trying to say at all. I like the freedom that I have in the time we live in. I like that I had the freedom to date and find a guy that I'm actually compatible with, instead of just marrying.
I agree. I mean, if I was forced into any kind of marriage, I'm pretty sure that I never would have gotten off the East Coast. I never would have moved to California. I never would have met a man like Justin, but I had the freedom as a young woman to say, you know what? I'm going to move to the other side of the country and do something different. And I love that I had the freedom to live my own life and I wasn't being controlled by my father or a man that I was being forced into a relationship with as like some kind of community merger amongst families. The other thing is, I'm here on YouTube. I am a woman dressed in, whatever I want to be wearing, showing my face to the world and saying what I have to say. Freedom of speech is a beautiful thing. And as a woman in America, like, I am so proud of the fact that I can say like whatever I want and like no man's gonna stop me.
Marrying the first guy in my village that happened to be interested in me. But the reason I like freedom and it worked out for me is because I learned how to use it responsibly. If you don't learn how to use freedom responsibly, it can actually be very destructive. And the message to women now is that freedom is just awesome and you can sleep with whoever you want because, yay, freedom. We can do anything a man can do. Yes, you can do anything a man can do, but does that mean that you actually should? Freedom comes with responsibility, and if you want freedom without the responsibility, it can become its own kind of prison, and you end up being free without actually feeling free. We have to realize that women also lost something in return for all that freedom and autonomy. We live in a society now where family life and community have become a lot less important. And those actually happen to be among the most important things that make humans feel happy and fulfilled. I'm not saying it's impossible to feel happy in our current society, but because of the individualistic nature of our Western society, you have to work a lot harder to get this sense of community and family life. With all of the freedom and the endless choices that we have now, you have to learn how to take agency over your own life. Because in my opinion, that is the true cost of freedom. Actually doing the work to become a responsible adult.
This freedom is another fundamental difference between women now and women of the 1950s. Women now are exponentially more free, almost in like every way, than women were in the 1950s. And when you are not free, when so many of your decisions are made for you and or it never occurs to you or you don't have the agency to think differently than what is being presented to you as this is the way things are done, it is easier maybe to be happier in that because you are being guided into a model of success. It might have been easier to obtain that happiness in the 1950s because you didn't have all this freedom of choices that women have now, which is also like a crazy thing to think about because this is brand new. This is brand new. Life is so different than it was for the last millennia of human existence. All of a sudden, women are given the freedom to, have sex and be promiscuous and go to school and learn and spend money, make money and spend money. And I'm not so sure that they're being taught how to deal or how to manage all of this newfound freedom in this, fast-paced TikTok scrolling lifestyle that we all live. It is not obvious to sit, reflect on your choices, admit when you've made a mistake, even if you're just admitting it to yourself. Admit that you've made a mistake so that maybe you'd choose differently next time. And really think about how, as a free woman in your 20s, the decisions that you're making, how they are going to shape your life moving forward.
But this debate was about whether modern feminism has gone too far. And I say yes, it absolutely has in our current culture. When I come across someone who calls herself a feminist these days, they often deny differences between men and women altogether, which is dangerous in my opinion because it's simply not true. And when you bring up scientifically backed arguments that there actually are differences between men and women, other than just what is between your legs, they say that is all just systemic sexism. I'm not saying all feminists are like this, but come on, what are we doing? This kind of talk is becoming more and more mainstream, and sometimes I don't even want to know where this is all going.
Not me, not here on the Cha-Cha Beat. We know that men and women are different. Men and women are equal in the United States, but men and women are different. I think there might be an undertone of bullying in the feminist movement to assert these next wave of feminist principles that, the non-binary or that whole agenda. And part of the reason why it is able to take hold of women is because Other women are too afraid to stand up and say that this is bullshit. Men and women are different. So I'm going to say it. This is bullshit. Men and women are different. In conclusion, I suppose my answer to are women happier today than they were in the 1950s, I would say maybe not, but also because the definition and the access to being happier, the streamline into a happy life was a lot easier in the 1950s. And now women have all this choice, all this freedom. And so while they may not be as happy as they used to be, I do believe that there is nothing but potential for women that decide to start to take accountability, start thinking about what they really want, what they don't want, making decisions and really defining what they want their life to be. I couldn't even imagine being happy as a 1950s housewife. Like, I don't like to clean, to cook, or or be a mom. So I mean, maybe if I didn't know anything differently, if I didn't have the choices and freedom that I have as a modern millennial woman, maybe I would have been happy. Okay, tchotchkes, that's all for today's beat. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And you can even click that notification bell so that you never miss a beat. Until next time, keep calm and cha-cha on.
Cha cha cha.